Hello, Chris Folk Podcast here, episode 88. We're coming in. I just got off my vacation in California, and it was pretty nice out there, man. The weather's sweet. We're south of San Diego. We're approaching the Mexican border a little bit. We stayed at a Marine base. All was good there. Now, when we come home, we kind of get back into it. It almost takes a full week to get kind of caught back up from vacation. You're like tired. You got some jet lag situation going on. The time change was a mess. Daughter hasn't been to school on time since we've been home, and all we're trying to do here is just make it happen in the best way possible. Now, yesterday I had a great walk, man, a 5-mile walk with a great friend of mine. This man's a New York City Fire Department firefighter, right? A couple weeks ago, he's on the cover of the New York Post, man. He's saving lives, he's saving babies. Now, he's gotten a lot of attention locally. People want to talk to him, this and that, but really when you look at these guys are heroes, man. They're literally the people that have the courage to run into a burning building. How many people would do something like that? There's not a lot. Everybody would like to say that they would be that person. This guy is that person, right? He would, do anything for you. He's just a great human overall. He puts his life on the line. And one of our conversations was kind of this whole like nature nurture thing where it's like, what makes people do certain things? And as we started talking here, he brought up the point that like human nature, human nature is kind of taking the path of least resistance. And I heard him, and I was like, I think it's kind of true in a sense because the body is going to adapt in a certain way to make tasks a little bit easier. But then I thought about it, and I was like, you know what? No, that's not true. I was like, you don't do that. I was like, you don't take the path of least resistance. You run into that fire. You run into that burning building when everybody else is a bystander standing there doing nothing, right? So I thought about this for a second. We started discussing other things, and taking the path of least resistance, taking the easy way out, is something that kind of parents and coaches get caught up in, right? I think this applies to just about everybody's life, where there's this quote that was like, hard choices, easy life, all right? So if we're able to make hard decisions, our life is going to be a little bit easier. But if we prolong those decisions, if we take the easy route out, if we make easy choices, we're going to have a hard life, right? And, over these past couple years, I think a lot of us kind of took the easy way out. Now, I saw a quote recently from a woman from New York University. She's a professor of nutrition there. And basically what she said is this. She said that, all parents want is for their kids to not be miserable. She said this in reference to the rise in obesity and all this other, problems with inactivity that kids and parents, to be quite honest, and adults have seen over these past two plus years now with COVID. And, a lot of her research here is what we talked about in the previous episode, or a couple episodes ago, we talked about the call to action, right? When we talked about obesity in children, where, ages 6 to 11 saw the largest increase and went from 36% to 45%, all right? 1974, the overweight obesity number was 16.4. 2018, pre-pandemic, 41.5%, all right? That's in kids aged, from 6 to 15. So what we're looking at here was a huge rise prior to the pandemic in overweight and obesity. The pandemic hits. Parents want their kids to not be miserable, right? They're sitting at home all day. They don't have anything to do. They might get a little bit lax. So our behaviors that we had prior to the pandemic, eating a little bit too much sugar, maybe being a little bit lazy, maybe not encouraging physical activity as much, kind of got blown out of proportion. It compounds to this point where over COVID here, the wheels fell off, so to speak, and things got terrible quick, all right? When we looked at the age group from ages 12 to 15, the increase that they saw over these past 2 years was comparable to the rise of the last 20 years. So since 1974, the numbers have been rising at alarming rates. What we've seen in that 12 to 15 age group, that rise in percentage is the same as it's been over 20 years. So 2 years equal the number of 20 years. If you don't think that's a problem, then we have some issues here. And one thing that I talked about, or not talked about, but thought about, and you try to find some people to talk to about this, and it's always these touchy, these tough topics, because nobody really knows what the real answer is. But because on one end of the spectrum here, kids aren't being active, and then on the other end, the kids that are active are kind of in these like environments of sports specialization and club sports, which prior to the pandemic, that was the big talking point with people that I would spend my time with, is that like there's a problem at the youth sport level, and now inactivity's on the rise. It's like we just got to get kids moving flat out, period. Whichever way they go, the best route is the one that they're going to be able to sustain, okay? Now, in the early 1600s, there was a man. Now, how do we do this, right? We educate, right? There's a man, John Amos Comenius. He is I don't know what they tout this man as the father of modern education, basically. John Amos Comenius, I think I have his name correctly. And what he said back in the early 1600s, the proper education, this is how we're going to educate, right? The proper education of the young does not consist in stuffing their heads with a mass of words, sentences, and ideas dragged together out of various authors, but in opening up their understanding to the outer world so that a living stream may flow from their minds just as leaves flow, just as leaves, flowers, and fruit spring from the bud of a tree. So it's our job as educators that when we talk to these kids, there's two ways that we're going to kind of approach subjects. We could approach it with this constrained learning skills, which is what Comenius said not to do, where you get kids to memorize the alphabet at a young age, where you get kids to prepare for standardized testing in the elementary schools, when you get kids to get the SAT exam prep course and they go and they pay hundreds or thousands of dollars to these SAT tutors, right? What you're doing there is you're trying to have these kids learn a constrained set of skills, and the cost of that is maybe not spending enough time learning the unconstrained qualities, right? Those are the things that are like, book smart versus street smart, or book smart, there's IQ and then there's emotional IQ, right? IQ is going to be learning these, that's not a great example. IQ is something that is somewhat inherent in who your parents are, so to speak, right? So not that, but just test scores compared to the emotional intelligence of an individual, right? Do they have empathy? Do they care for other people? Are they raised in an environment where some of these other qualities like music, physical education are emphasized, right? It's not, phys ed and music, stuff like that, they're getting dropped in schools. Why? Because of these constrained skills, these constrained tests that the school district gets money from the state or the government or however it works, whatever the motivation is. I remember back in the 70s or 60s, Deep Throat, the man that blew open the door on Watergate, said, man, follow the money. So the school's motivation might be monetary, driven by monetary reasons, right? So what are we doing there? We're overemphasizing test scores as opposed to getting kids active or doing any of the arts, right? That's a problem. A lot of these early educators, man, there's a great book called Giants in the Nursery where it talks about guys from John Amos Comenius and women, right? All the way up to, John Locke, to Maria Montessori, to present-day people like Erik Erikson, right? All of these people that are involved, it's Giants in the Nursery, it's these people that are involved in early education. Exposure to all this stuff at a young age creates a better human being, creates a more well-rounded person as they get older. If you stuff their heads with the alphabet, say in the preschool level, they might learn that. But now what we're also learning in this past decade or so is there's a term called fade out, where a lot of these skills that are learned in these constrained environments, these constrained learning environments, these kids that they pick it up at age 3 and 4, it starts to fade out of their mind a little bit, 5, 6, they don't know. Once you get them out of that constrained environment and those constrained lessons, they kind of forget this stuff, right? So some people are like, holy crap, what's going on here? What's wrong with the preschools and the kindergartens? But it's not that they're not teaching properly. It's that the focus might have shifted to skills that might not create the well-rounded student, all right? So how do we get past this point? These constrained skills, it focuses on a small set of elements which makes things an inch wide and a mile deep. When we're educating and when we're learning, we need to have it a mile wide and only an inch deep, okay? We need to be generalists instead of specialists, all right? You take that education approach, that's what happens with athletics too, where, hey, how do you get better at wrestling? Let's just send our kid to wrestling every day. It's like this preschooler learning the alphabet. How do you do it? You memorize, right? So you could go and you could learn a sequence of moves, a sequence of skills, right? But what happens when you get into an unconstrained environment where you have to create sentences, where you have to tell stories, where you have to create narratives, right? That kid that just stays in that constrained environment might not have the ability to think outside the box, so to speak, all right? They might not be able to think on the fly, right? And then with our athletes here, they don't know how to react on the fly because they've been in these constrained environments. It's like you watch I use wrestling as an example because it's a sport that often gets specialized. And you watch the NCAA guys or the Olympic guys, these guys are high-level athletes. They have flexibility, balance, these gymnastic-type moves. They're almost impossible to score on, right? You don't get that just by practicing your sport. You get that by doing a wide variety of athletic things, right? Gone are the days of just, hammering away, trying to get better at this. We need to, we need to be a generalist, like I said previously, man. We need to learn a variety of skills. so that we could react to these crazy environments. And, you see the strength and conditioning coaches, you see the sport coaches, they have all these beautiful drills. You could go to Instagram and watch them all day. You could do ladder drills, you could do cone drills. Everything has a designated start and stop time. That's a constrained skill. There's no variation. Sorry, not variation. There's no there's no reaction in there. There's no unstable environments. There's no unpredictability with these drills. There's a cone, get to the other cone, do the drill fast, and it looks smooth and it looks beautiful, right? But how many sports do you see with cones out on the field? It doesn't exist. You could do all your wonderful speed drills, right? But you could run, you could play football and you could work on that 40-yard dash or that 100-meter run or whatever, right? You could be the fastest person in those events. But in a game like football where you have to start, stop, change direction, go this way, that way, how often do you get to run, further than 10 yards without having to change course or get bumped off your course, right? Sports are unpredictable. Sports are volatile, right? Now, we got to remember, the way that we train here, like Kamini said, man, we just need to open up their understanding to the outside world, and the outside world is volatile, right? We can't control what the other people are doing. It's like chess, right? I can know every move in the world, but I don't know what's going on in my opponent's mind, all right? That is one thing that I can never control. And we need to keep that in mind when we start educating, right? We have these learning environments where we have constrained skills versus unconstrained skills. We have to remember that in order to get our kids to learn better, in order to get our kids to play better, in order to get our kids to accomplish things, we need to change. We need to constantly, the best way to put this is make the world unpredictable. Have them start, stop, have them jump, have them do this, have them do that. Don't just say, hey, I want you to run 10 yards and we're going to focus on that, and then we're going to stop, and then we're going to backpedal, and then we're going to do this. Give them a little bit of volatility, right? I don't want to keep beating a dead horse, so to speak, but that's what we're going with now. In terms of getting kids more active, this thing is multifactorial, like everything else. One, if you're at zero physical activity, let's start tracking steps. If you're at 5,000 steps a day, let's get you to 6,000, okay? Do you like yoga? No? Okay, fine. Do you like baseball? No. It stinks. It's boring. Okay. Do you like going to ninja class? Oh, that is kind of fun. You get to run and jump and it's unstructured, right? Get out of the way sometimes. Let them explore. Let them play. Comenius again. So going back to the 1600s, much can be learned in play that will afterwards be of use when the circumstances demand. We don't know when the circumstances are going to demand you to know these crazy these crazy set of things that we just practice, right? But when they do show their head, you're going to be ready for it. In the sport like wrestling, you get into these flow stage, jiu-jitsu, where it's like you just start rolling around, man, these scramble situations. That's where matches are won. That's where fights are won. Who could scramble the best? Who could react to these unpredictable environments? Those are going to be the ones that succeed, right? So now, how do we combine constrained skills and unconstrained skills? The constrained skills are the bridge, right? So if you're learning how to create a sentence, you do need to learn the alphabet, right? So there is a point to have these constrained skills. There is a point to having constrained sessions, because that creates the bridge that you could get into these unconstrained situations, right? So it's not like we totally neglect the constrained environment. One example that I use, we want to get kids to be more athletic, say they're just training for a sport. Say they play lacrosse. The sport of lacrosse is unconstrained, so practice needs to be that way. Some of your speed and agility drills need to be unconstrained. What can be constrained is what you do in here in the weight room, because what you do in the weight room is the bridge to better athletic achievement. It might be a little bit boring sometimes, but remember, the whole point of combining these constrained and unconstrained skills is to get the person to accomplish better things. If the entire training program is constrained, they're not going to be able to react on the fly accordingly. But if you could have most of their training be unconstrained, then when you focus on some constrained stuff, building strength, say, is one of those things that can make you a better athlete and make you better well adapted to be a more unconstrained athlete, okay? So stay with me here. We're focused on 5 things, right? We got the core 4, man. With these younger kids, I'm teaching the military press, the bench press, the deadlift, and the front squat. Then we got one more. Core 4 plus one more is what I call it, the hang clean. If most of our training is going to be built upon getting stronger at those 5 lifts, there's also going to be some sleds in there, right? Some carries, things like that. But for the most part, when we're in the gym, we're going to use a constrained training approach here. We're going to try to just get better at those things, because that is going to be the bridge to faster running, to more explosive movements, to being a little bit more powerful. If I could get more powerful and explosive in the clean, it might translate to a faster 10-yard sprint. And then that faster 10-yard sprint might allow me to beat somebody to a ball that I wouldn't previously have beaten, right? Or, even better, if I could get my bench press up and I wrestle, that's just a total over body strength. Or football, right? You're in there, you're driving, you're pushing with the upper body. The stronger I am, the more explosive I'm going to be with the upper body. The more explosive I'm going to be with the upper body, the more I'm going to be able to toss somebody, right? That's what we're talking about here. So we do need to have some constrained skills in an effort to make us better outside of the gym, all right? And remember what we said about play. These environments should be fun. They should be crazy, man. I was out to eat yesterday before I met with my boy Matt, the firefighter, right? And I watched a young baby walk down the stairs, man. He was holding his mom's hand. I don't even know if this kid was 2 yet. You see his face, the focus, right? He's focusing on everything. He's holding his mom's hand. He knows that he has some support if he needs it. But what his mom's doing, his mom's letting him explore new things, right? And because of that, this kid's going to be able to climb those stairs or come down those stairs sooner than the kid that the mom puts the brakes on everything, right? So I watched that kid walk down the stairs. I saw the pure excitement on his face. That's what our training needs to be. We need to let them explore, and then we need to pull it back in and get some focus too, right? Because that kid, that joy that kid had, if we could find that in our everyday lives, we're going to be great for it, okay? So what are we talking about here, man? We have a problem. Kids are not moving. I talked about it in a previous podcast. If you're going from zero inactivity, all right, let's get to some activity. And then from there, let's try to find something that you're going to like. Karate, wrestling, football, track. I mean, track and field has something for everybody, I think. Try to encourage them to get out there. You don't have to run the 400 meter. That's a grueling event. You want to get out there and throw a javelin? Fine. You want to go run and jump? Go run and jump. Track and field has something I feel like for everybody, right? If it's not for you, go to a gymnastic class. Go to a ninja class. Go to a dance class. Find something, please. A wide variety of things, right? Because we never know when we're going to have to call on these skills in the future, okay? You never know when you're going to get pushed over, and are you going to have a strong base to take it? You never know if you're going to slip on the ice, and if you have the balance to catch yourself and stay upright, or if you fall down and crack a hip, right? These are the reasons why we train. The other side of the spectrum is, say you got a kid in a sport. Remember, constrained versus unconstrained. Don't just focus and specialize. You got to generalize before you specialize, all right? Remember, it's a mile wide, an inch deep before you get an inch wide and a mile deep, all right? We need to introduce a lot of skills. Don't just beat your head and say, I'm going to wrestle. I'm going to go to lacrosse. I'm going to join every club. I'm going to play 10 games a week. That's not going to make you a better athlete, all right? It might make you better in the sport in that short term, but remember that lesson I talked about with the preschoolers and some of those lessons fading out over time. You might, when you get put in other environments where you got to create, you might not have it, okay? You might not have the ability to create. Being able to create, being able to think on the fly, being able to react on the fly is what makes some of these great people great. So if you are playing a sport, introduce a wide variety of things to them, okay? Don't fall into those traps of specialization. If there's a coach telling you to play those sports over and over and over again, and that's it, you got to join my team, you got to come to my training, tell them to kiss your rear end, okay? And tell them you're out. Go find another club, man, with a more relaxed environment. Remember the joy on that kid's face. Let the kids explore. Let the kids play, because that's where growth's going to happen. Hope you guys like this podcast. I just went 18 minutes, and I always forget to throw this in. YouTube, man, this is where the video is at. Spotify, Google, Apple. I don't even know, man. Stitcher's a thing, I believe. It's out there. The podcast is here. Chris Wilk Podcast. Like it. Share it. Let's get this viewership up. Let's get some people in here, man. I started a great program last night. Had 10 to 12-year-old kids in here trying to follow these same concepts. We're chasing people outside. We're tagging people. The enjoyment we had on day 1, we want to have on day 10. We don't want our kids to be zombies, so we got to add a little bit of variability into those days. We got to have some fun, get them laughing, get them smiling, attack every day with some energy. Hope you guys like this episode. Like it, share it, tell everybody you know about it. All right? I hope you guys like it, man. Peace, everybody.